everybody, and welcome back to Sorry I Missed This. I am so excited about this week's episode because this week we have Dr. Betty Martin on. So Dr. Betty Martin is a lot of things, including a chiropractor and an intimacy coach. She wrote the incredible book, The Art of Receiving and Giving, The Wheel of Consent. Fun story before we get into it. When I first started talking about having this podcast with Understood, Dr. Betty Martin was one of my dream guests. And I was like, assuredly, there's no way she would say yes and talk to little old me. But not only did she kindly and generously say yes, but it also has become one of my favorite episodes that we've done. And The Wheel of Consent, I cannot tell you enough, is one of the most meaningful books that I have encountered in my journey with late ADHD diagnosis. The Wheel of Consent is a tool that you can use to help understand the dynamics of giving and receiving in intimate relationships. With it, you can explore consent and boundaries and make sure that everyone involved in whatever action, whether it be getting them a glass of water, making a sandwich, I always use the example making a birthday cake, but whatever you're doing, up to and including intimate acts, everyone taking part understands what's happening and wants to be there. There's going to be a link to the diagram of the Wheel of Consent in the show notes, but I thought that it would also be useful to give you a little bit of a rundown before we jump into this awesome conversation. So you can use the wheel when an action comes up between two people. When it does, there are two factors: who is doing the action and who it's being done for, the giver and the receiver. These two factors, giving and receiving, line up in 4 different ways. So the Wheel of Consent is essentially a circle that is divided into 4 parts. The first part is serving, which is also known as giving, or saying, yes, I will do that. I would love to. The second section is taking, or asking, may I? The third one is allowing, or saying, yes, you may. That would be wonderful. And accepting, which is also known as receiving, or asking, will you? So you can see how accepting, will you do this thing, and serving, yes, I will, line up on the diagonal. But then you also have allowing and taking. So may I? Yes, you may. So those line up as well, right? The circle represents consent, or your agreement for what's being done inside of the circle. There is a gift given and a gift received. Outside of the circle or without consent, the same action can become stealing or abuse, that kind of stuff. And in fact, I think a lot of you will be really interested in what Betty has to say about things like people pleasing and overcommitting, because I know as a woman with ADHD, it is really easy for me to give and give and give and give and give. But it turns out that sometimes that might not be the best practice. So I am so thrilled to bring you this episode. I am so excited. I'm so grateful to Understood for making this happen. Without further ado, welcome to Sorry I Missed This, and here is my conversation with Dr. Betty Martin. Dr. Betty Martin, welcome back to Sorry I Missed This. I'm a huge fan. I'm glad we got that out of the way.
Thank you.
The first thing I want to do with you, Betty, is build a sort of common language with our listeners today as we talk about these sort of big ideas. So first, most importantly, what are we talking about when we say consent?
That is a great question, because most people, when they think of consent, they think it means permission. And so we call that the gatekeeper model, that I want to get through the gate, and will you let me through the gate? And can I do this thing that I want to do? And that's not a bad place to start. It's way better than nothing, but it's not the whole picture. I like to enlarge the idea of what we're talking about to consider, well, this is what interests me. What interests you? Oh, you want to try this? Yeah, I'll try this. Well, I'm not too keen about that, but yeah, I'm willing to try it, so that it's more of I'm interested in a conversation. And I think of consent as something that you don't give consent or get consent. It's something that you arrive at together. And I think really what we're looking for is an agreement.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you brought up that idea of agreement, because one of the reasons why I was so drawn to the Wheel of Consent was because I found that, especially when we're talking about ADHD, especially when we're talking about neurodivergence, there is a commonality of black and white thinking where something is either a yes or a no. And if it's not an enthusiastic confetti cannon, yes, then it's a no. And so I love that the Wheel of Consent kind of provides a different way of couching those conversations where it's like, I don't know, eating cake. Like I'm not super into eating cake all the time. But like I'm willing to do it this weekend with you because I know that you enjoy it and whatever the thing might be.
Yeah.
And so the wheel of consent sort of pushes back against that and breaks down consent more specifically into not only yeses and nos, but willings and wanting tos. Can you talk a little bit more about why those willing tos and wanting tos are so important when we talk about consent?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, it's helpful to know that there's a difference.
What is the difference between willing and wanting to?
There's things that I want to do for my own reasons. They're yummy to me for some reason, and they might or might not involve somebody else. So I might want a sandwich. I might want to walk in the woods. I might want to put my hand up your shirt. That's want to. There's also things that I wouldn't otherwise do for myself, but you want them, so that works for me. I can go with that. I'm not going to drive to the airport just for the fun of it, but if you needed a ride to the airport, hell yeah, I'll give you the ride to the airport. So, or, I'm not at this moment itching to put my hands up your shirt, but if you would like me to, I'd be happy to, so it's helpful to notice the difference because it's going to change your answer. If I say, hey, you want a piece of cake? And you say, no, I'm not really into cake right now. Oh, well, I'm disappointed. But it may be that, well, I'm not so much into cake right now, but I see, looks like you are. So I'm happy to sit down and have a piece of cake with you. It also helps to know that you don't have to be totally into everything that you do. You might be, I'm willing to give that a try. And that counts as a yes. The caveat is that don't take that to imply that, you just have to go along with a bunch of shit that you don't like. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, oh, yeah, sure, I'll do that if you want. Sounds good.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's the conversation that we're having is not one about coercion. It's not about convincing. It's not about asking so many times that your partner is exhausted and finally says yes when they actually mean no. We are talking about this idea of, you know what? Like, cake might not be my favorite thing, but it's your birthday, so let's celebrate, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really love about the Wheel of Consent is that it provides a model where we can get very easily and very respectfully, very communicatively, which I don't think is a word, specific, enough. Right? Because if I say, hey, do you want a piece of cake? What kind of cake is it? Is it chocolate? Is it strawberry? Is it vanilla? Is it carrot cake? Because if not, maybe that's not what I'm feeling, or maybe that's my favorite type of cake and I never get to try it. So providing more information then again sort of ties into that idea of willingness and wanting to and not putting yourself in positions where you are uncomfortable or, like you like to say a lot, enduring.
Yeah.
So I think we should probably go back a little bit and have you talk us through the Wheel of Consent as you sort of built it, organized it, describe it so that everybody can be on the same page. Right. So would you mind taking us through just the Wheel of Consent 101 basic welcome to class day one intro?
Those things we've been talking about so far are describing any good practice of consent. I didn't invent those. They're just like, so those are good practices, but they're not unique to the Wheel of Consent. So the Wheel of Consent, the piece of the picture that it brings is that if I ask you, will you rub my back? And you say, yes. Okay, cool. Then your hands are on my back and everybody's happy. But what if you ask me, do you mind if I put my hands on your back and kind of feel you up a little bit? That's going to still lead to your hands on my back, but it's going to be a very different dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So what the wheel of consent notices is that who is doing is a different question than who it's for.
Mm-hmm.
So I might have my hands on your back because you want them there and you want them done this way and you want this kind of thing. Or
Mm-hmm.
I might have my hands on your back because I want to get a good feel of you. Both of those modes are important and wonderful. And knowing the difference between what you're doing is where it gets all the fun and all the juiciness happens. That's basically it. What's the difference between who is doing and who it's for? And for most people, we have conflated, I'm doing, therefore it's for you. And that's not necessarily true.
Before we go any further, I do want to throw out a few more definitions.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about the wheel of consent, we have this idea of I am doing, I am giving you the back rub, or, someone else's, they are doing, they're giving you the back rub. So then you have the idea of giving and receiving. So I am giving the back rub or I am receiving the back rub. But you sort of divide these into 4 principles, which are serve, take, allow, and accept. Can you kind of just run down each one of them and sort of just tell us, like, what does serve mean in this context?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to redefine actually receive and give, because for most people, one meaning of the word receive means something's coming towards me and it arrives. I can receive a package in the mail. I can receive a lovely back rub. I can receive a punch in the jaw, which I probably didn't want. So, receive, that meaning of receive means it arrives. There's a different meaning of the same word, which is why it gets confusing. It's a different meaning of the same word, which is a gift that's something that I do want. You're giving me a gift. The problem is, what if the gift that I want is the opportunity to do something to you? So maybe I want to feel up your back, and you give me the gift of letting me do that. The action's going from me to you, but the gift is going from you to me. And so serve is the quadrant in which I am doing to you what you have wanted. I'm in serve. I'm doing to you what you've wanted. And you are what most people would call receiving, because you're getting the back rub and I'm giving you the back rub, and so you're accepting. Now, if I come along and I just want to get my hands on you because you feel nice to me, that's the taking quadrant. I say, may I feel up your back? And you say, well, it's good, but yeah, you can do that. I'm going to leave my shirt on, but yeah. And now I've got my hands on your back, but it's for my enjoyment. And that's what I call taking and you being allowing. The wheel of consent points out 2 dynamics, and it's serve, accept, and the other one's take, allow.
The specificity, I think, is really powerful, because especially as we move the conversation more to ADHD, more towards relationships with ADHD, I think that it can be so easy to jump into that land of assuming, my partner loves back rubs. Of course, she always wants a back rub, or, whatever it may be. And so breaking those terms down and breaking those ideas down, what they do is they provide a sort of, what is the word I want? Scaffolding that accounts for executive functioning differences. It accounts for sensory issues. It accounts for all of these different things that people with ADHD tend to deal with on a daily basis, and allows each partner to feel safe and understood and respected. So to go back to the back rub example, we're just really pounding this back rub example to death. But that idea of, hey, can I give you a back rub? Or hey, will you give me a back rub?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm really tired. I've had a long day. I know that back rubs are really important to you. I know that physical touch is really important to you, but I've got 10 minutes in me. Is 10 minutes okay? Yes, absolutely. 10 minutes is fine. Thank you so much. Great. So now
That's a great example of consent making right there.
Thank you. Well, and I learned it at one of your classes. But one of the things that I really like is that it invites a little bit more investigation into not only what am I looking for? I'm looking for a back rub. And what else are the parameters? Am I keeping my shirt on? Am I taking my shirt off? Am I willing for it to lead into, a more intimate time? Or do I just honestly just want the back rub because I had a long day at work? And so the reason why I think it's really important to talk about consent and ADHD is because I have seen both firsthand and just in the work that I've done with the community, how executive functioning differences can really impact our understanding of consent. Because again, to lean into that back rub example, hey, can I give you a back rub? Great. And then, an hour and a half later and you're really sore and you're like, actually, I kind of want this back rub to stop. Like, I'm not really enjoying this anymore. Then we're violating our own consent. We're saying, oh no, like I'm enduring, I'm putting up with because I don't want to hurt this other person's feelings. And so I think it's really important to have those conversations.
I would say that is not unique to neurodiversity.
Oh no.
No, that's just being human. I'm going to go back to something. And that is, you said, may I give you a back rub? Which was a pretty common question, but it's confusing. Because may I means it's for me. But give means it's for you. So who's it for? So if you say, may I give you a back rub? I say, yeah, sure, go ahead. Now you're going along and you want your hand to go this way. But I want your hand to go this way. So which way is it going to go? Like if this is really for me, then I want your hand to go this way. But you set it up as if it's for you, so you want your hand to go this way. So who's it actually for? And so if you're saying, may I give you blah, blah, then that's confusing. And what I would encourage you to say is, may I feel you up? Because that's what you actually want. Let's get honest about what you want. You want to get your hands on me, you want to feel me up, then just ask for that.
You gotta just say it how it is.
Yeah, it's a good thing to ask for. And it's a great thing to do.
Another thing that I was so surprised to learn when I first started sort of learning about the wheel of consent and this is this idea of taking. This idea of taking as a selfish act. Like, oh, I can't take something. That's bad. Like, oh, I don't want to take the last piece of cake. Oh, I don't want to, I don't want to ask to feel you up. That's like so rude.
Yeah, so how rude.
But that idea of the gift of asking, the gift of consent, the gift of saying, hey, here is what I specifically want. I specifically want you right now tonight to do X, Y, and Z thing, whatever that may be, dear listener, in your world, and being really clear, because then that way your partner isn't trying to mind read and intuit what you actually want. If you want the hand to go one way or the other, you are being very clear in your communication and I, again, sort of working in that scaffolding of communication, executive functioning, all of that good stuff. But it's just everybody gets what they want so much more efficiently if you aren't afraid of asking or, just being like, hey, I really want this specific thing, like this filthy thing. I want it. And I think that is, again, that's such like a weirdly revolutionary concept.
Totally.
And I wonder, like, if you can speak to that. Like, why do you think that is? Why do you think we're so afraid of taking or asking for directly?
Oh, I think it probably goes back to when we were toddlers. Because as a child, of course, we're reaching and grabbing and everything. It's like, that's what we do. That's our job. And so I reach for this thing, I reach for this other thing, and I get my hand smacked. And so I'm learning pretty quickly that taking action for my own enjoyment is a big no-no.
It's so funny that it just over and over again on this podcast, we keep coming back to this idea of what do I actually want? What do I actually need? And how do I empower and embrace those things in my own life? Which is honestly one of the reasons why I thought of you as a guest, because I was like, oh, I know a person who is specifically doing work about what do I actually want. When we talk about this idea of how do I even know what I want? How do I know, like, hey, can I give you a back rub? Well, what I actually want is to touch you. What I actually want is to feel connection. What I actually want is to feel like that super sexy part at the top of your neck where it goes into your shoulder, because I just think it's really hot. Like, so Dr. Betty Martin, author of The Wheel of Consent, how do we figure out what we want?
Oh, Ooh, that is you got another hour? That's a really
It's
good
like
one.
season two. Season two.
Yeah, that's really good because that's another thing we don't learn as kids so well is how to ask for what we want, and we get punished for it and shamed for it. And as you noted, even knowing what we want can be hard. And when I'm working with clients, mostly we just slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And, I say, how do you want me to touch you? They say, oh, I don't have any idea. I said, that's okay. We got plenty of time.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, after a few moments, something will bubble up. And it feels like forever. But it's usually, 10, 20, 30 seconds, not very long. And sometimes, if people are really struggling with this question, again, we're working in the realm of touch. You could extrapolate to other situations. But sometimes it helps to give kind of a tree of options or multiple choice. And so I'll say, well, let's see, you want below the waist or above the waist? Oh, above the waist. Okay. Do you want arms, torso, or head? Head. Okay. Do you want face or hair, scalp? Oh, hair. Okay. Do you want to feel it? Do you want to braid it? Do you want to pull it? Oh, yeah, I just want to feel it. Okay, you want to play with my hair? Yeah, that's what I want.
Mm-hmm.
So it can help to narrow down a little bit at a time what part you want and what way to touch it.
Yeah.
It also helps to have a little bit of vocabulary of,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, touch. There's scratch, poke, caress, tickle, rub, squeeze. There's lots of different ways to touch, but if you are not used to thinking of those, you might have no idea. I don't know. I just want to get my hand there. And what I recommend is starting with just feel around the thing. What does this arm feel like? What's it, where's the joint? Where's the bone? What's it feel like? Because that's an opportunity that we very rarely have.
It's also really powerful and I think really interesting. And this is a real pro tip, dear listener, wordhippo.com. I know that's going to sound like the most out of right field suggestion, but one thing that I realized is that I'm a person who really struggles to interpret my body's inner signals, right?
Mm-hmm.
I struggle to define what I'm feeling, and when I'm feeling it, I'm I feel bad, I feel good, I feel just a vague sort of static gray. And so using like Betty was talking about, these ideas of poke or scratch or caress or whatever, wordhippo.com, put in touch and then just read your options.
Oh, that sounds
and then you and your
great.
partner can create a menu.
Great.
It's so good. It's so good. But the other thing too, Betty, that I love about this is that you don't have to be an expert in the wheel of consent to take some of these tips and tricks away. The idea of offering your partner a if then this or A or B until you really get that is such a powerful practice for anybody, but especially for women with ADHD who might be struggling with aphasia or interoception or any of those things. That's so powerful. And it's really easy because it's just that extra moment of care and attention and compassion towards your partner and saying, okay, do you want a back rub or do you want a neck and shoulder rub? A or B.
Oh, wait, that's an option? Oh, gee, well,
exactly.
In that case. Well, you said something really brilliant a minute ago, which I want to go back to, which is you might, when someone asks you what you want, you might come up with an immediate impulse oh, I want to touch this, or oh, I want you to touch me. Or you might be more aware of how you want to feel.
Yes.
I want to feel connected. I want to feel nurtured. I want to relax. I want to get sexy. It might be the action that comes up, or it might be the feeling that you want. And then you can ask yourself, well, what's going to help me have that feeling? So your example of connection was great, because if what I want is to feel connected, there's a lot of ways that could happen. And some ways will work for at this moment better than others. So that's really brilliant.
Speaking of that extra hour that it might take, I have it on very good authority that you can maybe actually teach us this in 3 minutes. Is this true?
Well, there is something called a 3-minute game. That may be what you're thinking of.
Segue. That was
well
was the most shoehorned segue in the history of segues. It's like BT dubs. But I guess, Betty, what I do for real, I want to do is I want to give our listeners some real takeaways. Maybe like a couple of exercises that they can do tonight at home, some questions that they might be inspired to ask their partner the next time that they're looking for a back rubber cake or whatever metaphor we're going for. What do you got?
This is where the wheel of consent came from. This is the 3-minute game. You take turns asking each other these 2 questions. How do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes? And then you have a little conversation about that. And when you come to an agreement, you set the timer for 3 minutes and you do that. And it's important so I'm asking you, how do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes? Take your bloody time. Because the clock has not started yet. Okay? So it might take you a few minutes to notice and drill down. Okay, what do I want? And what kind of touch do I want? Or maybe I don't want touch. Maybe I want something else. So it's a wide open question, and slow down, because there is no hurry in figuring out what the answer is. And then you say, okay, will you rub my feet? Now, you have asked me to rub your feet. Now I pause and notice, wait a minute, am I happy to do that? Am I willing to do that? Do I have any limits about it? Maybe, yeah, but only with your socks on. Or, yeah, but I don't want any oil. But I can't do it with oil. Are you okay without oil? So then you have a little conversation about that. And you always respect my limits of, yeah, I'm willing to do it this way, but not this way. Or I'm willing to do it for this long, but not this long. And so that respecting of the giver's limits is crucial to the whole thing. So then we set the timer. I rub your feet for 3 minutes. We're all happy. You say, thank you. I say, you're welcome. And then it's your turn to ask me, how do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes? And I say, well, will you X, Y, Z? You say, yeah, I can do it this way, but not this way. Go set the timer, 3 minutes. Then I say, thank you. You say, you're welcome. And then the other question, which is, so that was all the first question. Next question is, how do you want to touch me for 3 minutes? And that's the one that for most people is kind of weird. And they're like, what? I don't even know what that means. It's an unusual question, but it's very simple. Well, let's see. I would like to, may I play with your hair? May I squeeze your calves? May I explore your hand and feel what your hand's like? And then again, you get to notice, well, yeah, I can do that if we sit this way, or I can do that, but I'm going to keep my shirt on, or I can do, yeah, I'm willing to try that. Let's make it out this way. It's a little conversation. Then we set our timer for 3 minutes, and we do the thing. And of course, you can change your mind anytime, because consent is not consent if you can't change your mind. So then we do that for 3 minutes. And now who says thank you? The person who was doing says thank you. I forgot where we were in the you or me, but if I was feeling up your feet, for example, I would say thank you. Even if it felt great for you, which it probably did, I'm the one saying thank you because I asked for the gift and you allowed me that gift. So I say thank you. And then we reverse that. So the 3-minute game, 2 people, 2 questions, take 3-minute turns, but it's going to take you about half an hour because there's the getting comfy, there's the negotiating, there's the sharing your ahas if you want to. And that's where the wheel of consent actually came from.
Dear listener, if you take one thing away from this podcast, I am begging you, if you are a person who struggles for asking what you want, if you are a person who struggles with rejection sensitivity, if you are a person who struggles with people pleasing, I see you. You are valid. Please go home and do this exercise tonight. Look, this one single exercise, like, I'm not even joking.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
One of the reasons why I'm so freaked out right now was because, like, Dr. Betty Martin, your work changed my life. Like, as a woman with ADHD who has struggled my whole life with people pleasing and rejection sensitivity, and, well, I don't want to say no because what if they don't like me anymore, and this social chameleoning and just the exhaustion of being a late diagnosed person, coming to the wheel of consent and being like, oh, wait, I am allowed wholly and specifically to ask for what I want, define it exactly, spend as much time as my brain needs defining it. And also that changeability, because that's the other thing is one thing that I hear so often from women with ADHD is just that idea of like, okay, my partner really wanted to have sex tonight and it was really important to them. And I said yes, and I was ready to go. And now like we're just about to start and I have changed my mind. And there's that moment of like, I'm a disappointment, I'm a letdown, whatever. But I think integrating the wheel of consent and these ideas of, okay, well, actually, I've thought about it. I'm not really up for sex tonight, but how else can I touch you? How else can I meet you? How else can I find a way to connect with you that is meeting both of our needs? Like, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful model. And I just will yell about it for all eternity if people let me. It's fine. When I was first learning about the wheel of consent, I remember I was like at the bookstore and I picked up the back of the book and the first sentence is like, why would most people endure unwanted touch that they don't even want? And I was like, wait, it's not just me. It's not just me. And there's a person who has written an entire book about why that might be. So I would love, Betty, for you to talk us a little bit through why might someone choose to endure or put up with, and how do we break out of that cycle?
Ooh, that's a really rich one. And again, this is not unique to ADHD folks, not unique to women either.
Yes.
I've given a lot of thought to that because it happens so often with clients and stuff. And I think what's true is that every one of us has been touched against our will in ways that we did not want, we did not like, and we were powerless to stop. Every one of us, even in the very best of circumstances. You can't get through childhood without having stuff happen that you don't want. It's just part of the way it is. And so you grow up learning, your body knows, okay, touch. That's this thing that happens to me even if I don't want it. You got your teeth brushed, whether you want it or not. You got your diapers changed, whether you wanted it or not. You got picked up out of oncoming traffic, whether you want it or not. You got moved into the other room for hitting your little brother, whether you want it or not. You go through life feeling like touch. Oh, when touch happens, my job is to figure out how to like it somehow. And that is backwards. That is so backwards. And some people come to me thinking, well, I don't like touch. And after we explore it a little bit, they discover, oh, it's not that I don't like touch. It's that I don't like the kind that I don't like. When it's what I do want, I like it a lot.
So what I want to talk about is that in the wheel of consent, there are also structures in place to sort of anti-people please, to anti-mind read, to anti-go above and beyond.
Yeah.
And I would love it if you could talk a little bit about what you like to call the shadow sides of the quadrants.
These dynamics can happen without consent. So maybe I walked by and reached over and grabbed your butt, but I didn't have permission for that. So that's what I'm describing as the shadow. And again, you can see it on the diagram, because it sometimes helps to understand the dynamic if you can see, oh, this is where it goes off. This is where it goes too far. or this is how it happens without consent. So
the one that absolutely blew my mind was this idea of like when we talk about like people pleasing and like serving and how serving without consent can ultimately lead to a lot of resentment. And I see this show up in so many of the ADHDers that I have worked with, where we tend, I don't want to make like the broad generalization, but some of us tend to want to go above and beyond. So it's like, if I'm making you breakfast in the morning, I'm not just making you pancakes. I'm making you pancakes and chocolate chip pancakes and blueberry pancakes. And I don't know, let's go crazy with it.
I'm coming over.
Right? I know. I go hard on breakfast. It's an important meal. But the thing is that if nobody asked for 5 types of pancakes and you do all of this work and you're like, yes, I am the breakfast master. Oh my God. But then nobody acknowledges it. And they're like, oh, thanks for making breakfast. And you're like, but what about the 5 types of pancakes that I made? What about all this work I did serving you? What about all of this time that I put in? And you start building up these resentments of like, well, they didn't even appreciate how hard I worked. It's like, nobody asked you to. That was outside of the wheel of consent. You decided to do that. And I've had to look at myself a lot and be like, did they ask for that? Or did you just decide that you were going to overserve and overgive? And now you're getting mad about it. And I think that's really something that the wheel of consent helped me unpack and start to like realize that was showing up a lot in my own life. So dear listener, don't feel bad. Just work on it. Because sometimes you work too hard.
Yeah. And then we have to ask ourselves now, who is that really for? Like,
it's for me.
Was
and
that
was
really,
the thing, right?
Was that really a gift for the breakfast eaters? Or was that an attempt on my part to get some kudos?
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's a secret validation the whole time.
One thing the practice of the 3-minute game does is helps you start to normalize asking for what you want, and helps you start to normalize saying no or negotiating a little boundary. This gives you a structure that's small and short and easy and contained, so that you can start learning those skills, which then become transferable to other places in your life.
I just want to acknowledge, like, it can be so scary to say no.
Absolutely.
Especially if you have been told your whole life that, you know, you are too much and all of this stuff. And so when you finally get that validation, it's like, oh, well, I have to say yes. You don't.
That's
and
right.
I love that the Wheel of Consent not only encourages and builds on the skill of saying no in a safe and comfortable container, but it also empowers us to sort of take those lessons and bring it out into the world and be like, no, sir, at the bar, you may not touch me. Please go away or whatever. Yeah. It's brilliant. It's just brilliant. You're so brilliant. You're so good and smart and good at stuff, Betty Martin. It's great.
Thank you.
We are just about at the
things.
You're great at a lot of
I'm
things.
shit at other things.
The last thing I just want to ask you before we go is, you have so much knowledge. You have written an incredible book. You have all of these incredible materials. Where can the people find you? Where can they learn more? How do they Wheel of Consentify their lives?
The Wheel of Consent, there's a bunch of free videos on my website, bettymartin.org. And we have a Instagram, just put in Wheel of Consent. You get a bunch of stuff. And the schoolofconsent.org is where we teach our classes. But yeah, look it up on YouTube. There's many hours of it there.
And if you are a practitioner, if you are a therapist, if you are somebody who works with neurodivergent people and you would like to incorporate this Wheel of Consent work into your own practice, you also host teachings and workshops for educators and facilitate those around the country. I've been to a couple myself. They were incredible and life-changing. I cannot say enough good things about the Wheel of Consent. But Dr. Betty Martin, thank you genuinely from the bottom of my heart for being here today.
You are so welcome. And thanks for telling me how impactful it's been for your life.
It really has. You changed my life, Dr. Betty Martin, and I appreciate it. And I'm not going to cry on my own podcast because that would be silly. Thank you for listening. Anything mentioned in the episode will be linked in the show notes with more resources. Have a question, comment, burning story you'd like to share? Email us at sorryimissedthis@understood.org. This show is brought to you by Understood.org. Understood is a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering people with learning and thinking differences like ADHD and dyslexia. If you want to help us continue this work, donate at understood.org/give. Sorry I Missed This is produced and edited by Jessamine Molly and Margie DeSantis. Video is produced by Calvin Kinney. Our theme music was written by Justin D. Wright, who also mixes the show. Ash Beecher is our supervising producer. Brianna Berry is our production director. Neil Drumming is our editorial director. For Understood.org, our executive directors are Laura Key, Scott Coshier, and Seth Melnick. And I'm your host, Cate Osborn. Thank you so much for listening.